One of the most important things that we cover in this class is the difference between the independent and the dependent variable, and a lot of the questions on the worksheet assignment are dependent on your ability to understand the difference between the independent and the dependent variable. And so I wanted to go through a couple of concrete examples of what independent and dependent variables are. We have two variables, the independent variable and the dependent variable. And what we think is that the independent variable in some way causes the dependent variable. Often what we mean by that is that you are in a treatment or a control group, a variable that we control, that we manipulate, whether you're in the treatment or control group, and that might be random assignment, it might be a weightless control group design, it might be some geographic area, like I'm comparing one county to another county, but something that we experimentally, hopefully experimentally or otherwise manipulate, has an effect on some outcome of interest. So we might think, for example, that cognitive behavioral therapy, being in the cognitive behavioral therapy group versus the usual care group, will cause lower levels of depression and outcomes. So depression would be our dependent variable, and CBT versus usual care, whether you're in the treatment or the control group, would be our independent variable. We might also think that something like poverty, for example, causes more depression. So again, your level of poverty in this example would be our independent variable. And while we're not experimentally manipulating it, we are observing it. And in that context, we think, and again, the key is the causal relationship. So we think that more poverty causes higher levels of depression. Now you'll notice with this example that higher levels of depression could also be a cause of poverty. And in fact, we know that as people become more depressed, their income goes down and they're more likely to be poor. So we know that both it's in the data suggests that poverty causes depression and depression causes poverty. So they can move between, variables can move between independent and dependent variables depending on the questions that you're asking and depending on your hypothesis. Just for point of reference, it's usually not true with the treatment or control group versus outcome. We would generally not ask whether lower levels of depression cause whether you're in the CBT or the usual care group, because we probably have figured out some way to make you be in the CBT versus usual care group. So we usually mean the causal direction this way. The key element to determining what the independent versus the dependent variable is to ask which variable the author is suggesting has an effect on another variable. And often there'll be many independent variables, but generally there's only a couple dependent variables. And in most of the articles that you're reading, it's going to be whether they're in the treatment or control group on some outcome. And there might be multiple outcomes. There might be depression, anxiety, a whole host of things, social support. But in all of those examples, it's believed that the independent variable is the cause of the dependent variable. Hope that makes it clear, and if not, send me an email.